Hi, everybody. It's good to see you all logging on. Very excited to talk to you today. I want to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the first real day of this conference. I understand some of you ran a 5K this morning, which is absolutely incomprehensible to me. One, because I don't do mornings, and two, because I live in Florida, where it is excruciatingly hot and muggy. So very proud of you all for that. I wanted to welcome you to the Peer-to-Peer World Conference and go over a couple of things. I wanted to give a special shout out to the people who are making this conference possible. I wanted to, I'm not sharing my screen. That is a good thing to know. Apparently when you switch into regular mode from practice mode, you don't share your screen automatically. Well, I wanted to thank everybody who is making this conference possible. I know that a ton of time and energy goes into planning these events, so thank you so much to everyone who is making this work. If you need a refresher, this is just a quick snapshot of all of the phenomenal different sessions and speakers and experiences that we have planned for you. I do hope you stick around for the upcoming session at 2:30. It looks like it's going to be a really great one. Just a couple housekeeping items. This is going to be recorded. It will be made available to you after the fact. So if you miss something, or if you're taking notes and miss a slide, don't worry, you're going to get it so you can review it whenever you're ready. And I did want to point out that there is a Q&A box and a chat box. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat, but if you have questions, do please put those in the Q&A box. The chat can get moving really fast sometimes, and I want to make sure that we answer all of the questions that you have. And then just as a quick reminder, at the end of this session, you're going to get a little survey that pops up where you can let us know how we did and what you took away from it and what you'd like to see in the future. All right, all of that out of the way, let's get to why you're here today. We're going to be looking at trends and predictions for peer-to-peer fundraising. If you are like me and you really like to know who's on the call with you, here is who you're going to be hearing from. My name is Abby. I'm part of the team over at QGive, and I focus on learning different fundraising best practices and strategies, keeping an eye on the trends and tools that are available to nonprofit fundraisers, and then sharing that with you so you don't have to do all of the research. And then more importantly, you're going to hear from my friend Margot Pagan. She is the Associate Director of Marketing and Development at the Sharing Center. And she and her team have come up with some really phenomenal, creative peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns over the last year and a half or so. And she's going to share a ton of amazing insight and advice with you today. So let's get right into it. What do we think we're going to be looking at today? And what do we think is going to be the future of peer-to-peer fundraising? We're going to have 3 different predictions about kind of the future and the evolution of peer-to-peer fundraising. For each of these, we're going to look at how Margot and her team are kind of making these happen in real time. We're going to look at some campaign examples, both from the Sharing Center and from a bunch of different organizations. Hopefully those ideas will kind of spark some creativity in you and get you excited about the versatility of this fundraising style. And then for each kind of prediction, I'll share some tips and strategies you can use as you kind of explore those at your own organization. So the big question that I think we're all kind of asking right now is, what does the future hold? Particularly today, we're going to look at what the future holds for peer-to-peer fundraisers. And we have 3 real predictions that we're going to go over today. The first one is we're predicting that virtual and hybrid fundraising events are going to stay really popular, even as things kind of return to normal. We're going to look at the fact that fundraisers are getting more and more creative with the peer-to-peer kind of fundraising style. And we're going to look at how nonprofits are kind of increasingly folding peer-to-peer fundraising into bigger kind of overarching campaigns instead of keeping them siloed. I don't know about you all, but a lot of organizations that I've talked to have people who focus exclusively on planning events and they don't really interact with the rest of the development departments. And I have a suspicion that that's going to change, and we're going to look at why that is. So the first thing I want to talk to you all about is the idea that we foresee virtual and hybrid events kind of staying present, even as things return to normal. So we anticipate this for a number of different reasons, but the biggest reasons that we kind of see this happening is one, because of the short term, COVID precautions are still in place. They probably will be for a while. But even after those precautions have relaxed, we really see this sticking around because nonprofits are discovering that virtual and hybrid events are more accessible to some of their constituents that can't participate in more traditional in-person events. We're also hearing that a lot of nonprofits are discovering that their virtual and hybrid events have lower overhead costs than their traditional events. Of course, there are always exceptions, but we are seeing some of our clients at QGIve keep the hybrid events that they launched last year because it's been popular and more profitable for them than some of their more traditional events. So what does this look like in real life? I'm sure we can all we've all probably had experiences with these, but I want to look at a specific example from the Sharing Center, and it's their Sweet Bites and Bikes. And I always stumble over that, Margo, so don't laugh at me if I mess that one up. So just as a quick overview, this was a virtual response to their Sweet Charity fundraising event. It was a known event that ended up being switched up because of COVID last year. Last year when they ran this campaign, it was for the 34th anniversary, and all of the participants were kind of invited to engage with the 3 and 4 in there. So bike 34 miles, run 3.4 miles, like some of you people did this morning, amazing. Swim 34 laps, whatever really occurred to you. And during this fundraising period, they raised around $38,000. Margo can probably give me a more specific number there if it's handy at the top of her head. But the thing that I really appreciated about this event is how accessible and useful this was. They also emphasized virtual togetherness, which I thought was really wonderful. I don't know about you all, but certainly last year and to an extent this year, the virtual togetherness has been much more achievable than in-person togetherness. But they also got kind of creative with some other things. So the 34-year theme was really great. They also did an online raffle for a golf foursome. So golf is a very kind of COVID-friendly experience, and the small group made it a safe prize to hand out. And then people were encouraged to participate and then log their activity using something like Map My Run or Strava or Map My Ride. So there was still the accountability of having a run or a bike or something without having to crowd together with a bunch of people at the starting line. So all of that kind of groundwork laid. Let's hear from Margo. Margo, can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of came up with this idea?
Sure. So the previous event, Sweet Charity, wasn't a Sunday afternoon kind of an older audience where you came on a Sunday afternoon and it was appetizers as well as lots of desserts, a ton of desserts and wine. So it was very, very much like a sweets kind of, way to spend your Sunday. So we really wanted to capture that because a lot of our older donors and supporters and attendees of the previous Sweet Charity event, they still are out active, they're walking, but they also like their little mini cupcakes and things like that. So, and we thought, what better way? So some of the prizes that we actually gave away were like 4 mini cupcakes to a local bakery here. So when you completed it, you still got your cupcakes and all of that. So we really wanted to incorporate some sort of health based event as well, which we had not yet done in the past because obviously people were so concerned with not being able to go to the gym yet. People were talking about, I think it's called the COVID-19 right now. And so I guess that's the thing. And so, gaining 19 pounds basically. And so, we wanted to find a way where folks could really get outside. Inside is great, but outside is a lot better. And
Yeah, for
so,
sure.
so that's how we kind of came up with this campaign. And then we knew we were going into our 35th anniversary. So we kind of wanted to preemptively tell people, hey, this is our 34th. So that when we rolled out our 35th anniversary, there was some brand awareness around that, as part of our holistic development and marketing strategy.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I love the idea of planning so far in advance to kind of get people psyched about your 35th anniversary that you built that into your 34th. I think that's a pretty that's the kind of long-term planning to which I aspire as a human being and as a professional. I love that. So this is something that was relatively new for you all. It was kind of probably a gamble. It felt like to change a beloved event into a different format. What was your favorite part, or what surprised you about your responses that you saw?
So a couple of things surprised me. One is, so the actual event itself did raise $38,000 from attendees. So those participating in the actual Sweet Bites and Bikes. But in total, we ended up raising over $110,000, which was about $30,000 more than what we had budgeted for the original Sweet Charity event. And so that kind of blew me aside a little. Granted, a lot of this was during a pandemic year. You get a lot of the emergency response, but this was such a highly involved that this wasn't necessarily okay, let me, donate $25 to help, someone. This was, no, I have to go ride my bike, I have to get the equipment, I have to stretch, I have to prepare. And so for people to get involved in that way, and again, even though this was totally different than anything we had done before, we got several new donors as a result. And so I think it was just the overall excitement. And then also Instagram and Facebook kind of blew up for the day. People were doing their stories. So it was like really fun to kind of interact with people throughout the whole day, because we didn't set it to a time frame. So people could go out at 11 o'clock or 11 o'clock a.m. or 11 o'clock p.m. So it was really cool to see.
Did you give them like a hashtag or something that they used? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So it was Sweet Bites and Bikes. It was kind of long, but as we think back to it, but yeah, it was a lot of, making sure that folks added us and everything.
I love it. Do you think this is, or how do you kind of see the Sharing Center use virtual and hybrid events in the future?
So we have been playing more so with hybrid events. We had a full event with 250 people in a room in April, and I'm still getting heart palpitations that we actually were to pull that off, and also that there was no reports of anything except for good times. And so this this event was live streamed across multiple different platforms. And that was something very, very new to us, because this particular event, if anyone's familiar, it's called, it's basically structured as a Benavon model event. So this is for new supporters generally. So you have table captains who recruit new people to our mission. And then we give them pledge cards, and they essentially are asked for a monthly or a multi-year pledge. And so it's a high caliber type of event. It's usually, it's a very in-person peer-to-peer model, right? And so what we did with that event was we not only live streamed it, but also for the table captains that were not comfortable attending, but they still wanted to support, we created a virtual table captain option. And so they hosted events at their office or at their home with people that they knew were COVID free, but then also kind of, you know, were welcoming into their personal spaces. And so that essentially elevated the number of tables that we would normally, you know, we're able to have in a physical, like essentially a hotel. So instead of having, you know, 40 table captains, we were able to have 100 table captains. So, so that made it kind of like that made it really, really interesting. And I think that that's something that we're going to continue to explore going forward, because again, not everyone's able to take a midday break and just go support a nonprofit, but they may be able to do something remotely, you know, maybe later that evening, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, you did a perfect job of kind of segueing into my next question, which is how you're using these virtual and hybrid events to reach new audiences. I know that you've seen that growth there. Are you seeing that continue? Are you continuing to recruit new supporters?
Yes. So our file size has grown significantly. We have so our database is about 21,000 supporters. At this time, the same time last year, it was at 16,000, between 16,000 and 17,000. So the amount of new names that we're getting as a result of doing either fully virtual or hybrid or you know, kind of online, the picture that you're seeing right now, we actually paired, you know, as part to win a prize, you know, as part of this event. So we're kind of layering in social, those are actually Disney tickets, for instance, that were already donated to us. So we're able to kind of play with the multi-channel or omni-channel a lot smoother than if it was solely in person.
That's a really interesting point, and I never would have thought that a multi-channel would be smoother than just a straightforward in-person. So what, I mean, if you have a situation where your virtual and hybrid events are doing or are going more smoothly, what advice can you share for people who are considering kind of putting together a hybrid or a virtual event that they haven't tried yet?
Sure. So I would definitely suggest, so whomever your peer-to-peer fundraising or your online fundraising where you are hosting your event. So QGive obviously is an option, and the option that we happen to use, but obviously there's others out there. But I would connect with your support team there and ask them. I mean, I know probably the QGive support team. Just the other day, it was kind of funny because I said, oh, well, let's call Molly about that. I literally know the support team by name because of last year's learning curve about what is possible. How do we convert this to that? So they, I think, have been a critical step in this direction, and just connecting with them and finding out, you know, who knows better than, you know, how the system works. And they also work with hundreds, if not thousands, of other nonprofits that are also trying to kind of navigate the same world. So, I mean, we picked off of like some best practices or maybe some examples or parts of a different campaign that another organization did and made something else, you know, into our own, you know, something that's going to work for us. And so I would, that's my biggest piece of advice is they are your go-to resource. Not only obviously do they understand the technology, but they also understand the sector at large and kind of what's working, what totally bombs, you know, that, I mean,
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Good. That's something that I wish I could like tell people all the time. Like, regardless of who you're using, QGive, Classy, anybody, call the
Yes.
support and ask them what other people are doing and what's working. And if you have an idea, tell them, and they may be able to say, like, actually, we saw someone try that last month and it didn't work out. You should do this instead.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's so helpful. We've got a couple other tips for some of you. Just out of curiosity, if you run a virtual or hybrid event, would you type yes or no just to let me know, let me know where you are? I know that there are a ton of moving pieces that go into some of these virtual and hybrid events. So I'm curious to see what you guys have done, if you've explored it or not. Awesome. Looks like some of you have. One, no, but we do DIY fundraising, which is awesome. It's such a good idea. Good, awesome. Well, I wanted to share a couple little tips that we've picked up kind of just at QGive and looking around and seeing what people are doing. So take a leaf from Margot's book and try transitioning a well-loved event to a virtual format, and then take out the pieces that you know people really love about your organization and see if you can extend that to them. Just like Margot had her cupcakes that went out to people as they were wrapping up, that's phenomenal. We saw one organization move their Derby Day event from an in-person to a virtual event, and they people really missed the what are they called, mint juleps, and so they sent out mint julep baskets. They're all kinds of fun things. And then as you're kind of planning how you're going to transition things over to a virtual event, try to anticipate what your constituents are going to need. I love this event here that I have a screenshot of. It was a bowl-a-thon. Everybody loves bowling, but especially, I don't know about you guys. Did you ever think about how germy bowling is before COVID-19? You're sticking your fingers in the balls and you don't know who else's fingers have been in there. Kind of gross, but they had this really great virtual bowling, and then people could screenshot their scores, submit it to the organization, and could win that way. But I will say, this is something we've seen a lot too. Plan staff responsibilities ahead of time so people know exactly like what they need to do to track participant kind of stats or numbers or whatever you decide to track. Having those staff assignments beforehand will help your event go a lot more smoothly. Some other things I would encourage y'all to try is to, even though it should be like part of your overarching plan, everyone knows what your organization supports, reiterate to your participants and your donors exactly how their participation in this event is going to make a difference in the community. Especially if this is a kind of well-loved event that you're switching up, people may have concerns. So, well, does this money support something different? Are we supporting the same programs as last year? Just let them know exactly what they're supporting, because they're going to be more excited if they know that their involvement is going to make a difference. We all know that communication is an important part of event planning anyway, but it's doubly important when it comes to virtual events. So just try to anticipate your participants' questions before they come up. My favorite method for doing that is to sit down with someone that's totally unfamiliar with your event and kind of ask them what questions they would have as they kind of register for and support your event. And then this is something that we're seeing, and several of you have said that you have your fingers crossed for hybrid events this year instead of just social or just virtual. If you can, try setting up different registration packages for different styles of participation. So if you're having a virtual event and you have some people running a 5K or participating in a bike race in person and some doing it virtually, try setting up different packages for people to buy as they go through the registration process. That will make it easier for you to get the right information to different groups of donors, and can give you a little flexibility too if it comes down to like pricing. And a couple other quick things, especially if you're running a virtual or hybrid event that has lots of different styles of participation, try to make it as easy as possible for your donors to give to you regardless of where they're giving from. So I would make sure that your registration pages and your fundraising pages are mobile friendly, just because we know that more than half of all internet traffic now comes from mobile devices. But just try looking at your donor base and anticipating what they're going to want from you as they support you. If you have a broad base of young participants, they may want to support you with more texting tools. They may want you to be more active on social media. If your participant group kind of skews older, they may be more interested in communicating through email and personal phone calls. Really just try to anticipate what they're going to be looking for in terms of participation and fundraising for you, so you can give them the tools that they need. And then, of course, especially if you work with a broad range of people, try to give folks the opportunity to support you, even if they can't donate a lot of money themselves. regardless of who you're working with, they may not be able to make big donations. They may not have friends that can give you big donations, but give them the opportunity to support you by volunteering or recruiting other people to participate. Lots of different options there. The next kind of idea that we have, or the next prediction that we have, is it's not even really a prediction at this point. It's just something that's actively happening. We are seeing so many creative fundraising ideas. I don't know about you all. I have seen an absolute explosion in creativity in the nonprofit sector, and the out of the box fundraising events that people come up with are surprising and they're delightful. I included a lot of examples in this section. I wish I could show you hundreds of different examples, but I can't keep you here all day. But here is why we think this is going to happen. So we think people are going to continue to push the envelope with peer-to-peer fundraising because people are getting used to virtual and hybrid events, and we're looking for new, exciting ways to help. And if you're intentional about it, changing up your event style can be a really great opportunity to engage people who may not be able to participate in more traditional peer-to-peer events. You may have someone that can't run a 5K, or someone that doesn't have the equipment necessary to participate in a bike race. Opening up your event style also opens up the number of people who may be able to participate with you. And then the other thing is that these fun, creative events are more fun for everyone. They're more fun for your supporters, especially if they have been participating in a lot of virtual and hybrid events. And it's more fun for you if you're doing something new and exciting rather than kind of running the same kind of format of event that you do all the time. So what does that look like? There are lots of different options. I included that JA virtual bowling a few slides ago. Folks used this event to put together a board fundraiser, and they absolutely blew it out of the water. I'm a huge advocate of using peer-to-peer fundraising for your board members. I'm not here to yell about that today, but it's such a good idea. You should look into it. We had City Year Philadelphia do pie throwing. Really great, fun way to get people engaged. Even if you can't run a 5K, you can still take a pie to the face. We saw this, which was absolutely one of my favorite challenges last year when everybody was on super lockdown, not really able to leave home. This organization put together an at-home challenge. In this case, they asked people to climb stairs 29 times to kind of acknowledge the height of Mount Everest. And then I love this scavenger hunt. We saw all kinds of cool scavenger hunt ideas, trivia contests, really endless possibilities. So I know we've kind of alluded to it, but I want to dig into some of the really creative things that the Sharing Center has done. So Margot, I know you folks used peer-to-peer tools in a zillion different ways. You did Sweet Bites and Bikes. You did that luncheon, you set up a food pantry. How did you guys come up with all of these ideas?
Again, I think we really dug into more of the similarities between a virtual event and a in-person event, right? So, the nature of the event and the essence of it is really the same. And so we really just kind of focused on what experience do we want people to take away from this if they participate. And that was kind of our North Star, or our guiding light. And, do we want them to be happy? Do we want them to be fit after it? Do we want them to feel like they have, fulfilled their charitable desires, and things. So we really just kind of morphed it in a way where it's just another channel. It wasn't necessarily that, it didn't even really dawn on us, I guess, after some of the events or some of the things launched, that it was virtual versus in person. It just became, this is just a different placement of it. But we still tried to make people feel connected. in that way. So even if we, did a shout out or something in our email communications, to kind of connect people, we got tons of pictures from people. So we were sharing those constantly, on social media and also on our website and things. So when people kind of saw it, it didn't ever feel like we went away, or folks were away from each other. So I think we just try to keep that essence of events, and it has worked out pretty well.
So before I move on to the next question, I have to ask, how do you get people to send you pictures? Because I've tried getting people to send me pictures during events and they won't do it. What did you do to get them to send you pictures?
We created a form that they could just upload on our website, and it was just like a 2-click thing, and it's just upload, and they could, access their phone's photo library, and they just like put up the pictures. And we have a very I say it's strange, but because I've worked at other agencies where it is a bit harder, but we have a wonderful supporter base. Like if we ask them to do things, they're just like, oh, okay. So they're very, very helpful in that way. And also we try to tell people why we're asking them for it. So, oh, let us spotlight you, or something like that. And generally people have been receptive to those requests.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm going to make a mental note of that. I've been asking people to text me pictures like a goofball. I love the idea of having them upload them. That's so handy.
Yeah.
So you touched a little upon the luncheon that you converted to a peer-to-peer event. Could you expand a little on what that luncheon looked like before the change, and then how you got it to the point that you have 100 different table captains? That's amazing.
Yeah. So the Benavon model is a very structured, tried and true fundraising model. And so prior to the pandemic happening, we spend the entire previous year essentially inviting people to what we call our Helping Hands Welcome Tour. And so this is when new folks in the community that were meeting at chambers or through connections or through board invitations are able to come to the sharing center, take a tour, and learn more about us. Those people are then kind of cultivated into either being an attendee and or a table captain. And so so we get generally be 10 to 15, every single month to attend. So that gives us, over 100 people of new people to us in order to invite them to be table captains and or attendees for the event. And so that's how like I guess the in-person model really works. And again, we really took our Good Samaritan, so it's called the Good Samaritan Luncheon. And we really took that and said, okay, we can only fit X amount of people in the room. But we know that there's a whole community out here. How do we get to the rest? Right. And so we still wanted to hold the event because we had been working for a year to cultivate those people. And so we gave them the decision on whether or not they wanted to come in person or become a virtual table captain. And so they made their choices. And we essentially created toolkits for them. So this is how you get started. If you're a virtual table captain, this is how you're going to kind of run your event. But what's also kind of cool that we did embed into this is in-person table captains could also use the same peer-to-peer fundraising link as well for people who they invited, but again, did not either feel comfortable attending, but that could still support financially. And so we kind of had this like, we don't ever really do one, I guess one avenue. So we try to open it up, and this here is a Facebook post that we launched digitally via email and all of that for kind of the people who we would have never been able to get into the room, but that we would still want to hear the same message that they're hearing, during the event. So
I love
yeah,
that. And I'm still fixating on your like in-person tours and how great a tool that is for building the relationships that later on in the year will kind of result in this participation. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
And as someone who lives in your area-ish, we both live in Central Florida, but you're on the coast and I'm inland. I think it's really cool that I could potentially participate all the way from over here instead of driving up there. I love that. So you've come up with some really creative workarounds and really creative event formats. And I know a lot of, at least for me, my biggest hurdle when I'm trying to plan something like this is coming up with the initial idea. If you need to come up with an idea, what does that look like for you? What advice can you give to someone who needs that initial idea to kind of jumpstart the process?
So for every campaign at the Sharing Center, or any sort of new initiative or even existing initiative, but it's a new year for it, we have basically a brainstorming session or a planning session. And so we get kind of as many brains in the room as we possibly can from different areas, so that we have a very diverse brain pool, if you will, so that we are really looking at this. So we have external people. So we have like we have obviously our board committees. So we have like a marketing communications committee, we have a development committee. And so sometimes we ask them as well to come in and help us even from naming. So like the sweet bites and bikes, for instance, we go around the table and, people are throwing things and throwing things out there, and we're putting Post-it notes on the wall. So any one of our like creative initiatives has really been a source, or rather sourced from everyone just kind of chipping in here. So like we may use like one word that someone said like 45 minutes ago and pair it with like, oh yeah, that, and then the sparks just kind of happen. But that we use that methodology or that practice with everything that we do. So I think it made it really, really easy for us to just do it again for this and just kind of think in a different way and, banter back and forth, but what if, but, if it was me, all of those different considerations come into play. And so I think just kind of coming at it, even if it's not in the fundraising or development department, bringing others. So we'll have our program team, especially for something like a virtual pantry drive or something that's focused on that, we'll bring our program team into it, just to kind of bring diversity and just a different perspective, because we can all get the horse blinders on to our own little areas. Like, no, I know our donors are going to like this, and then we have to understand a lot of times that our donors are just other human beings. And so, we all like different things. Yes. And we all have our, affinities for certain things, but it really does take like the collective to come up with something that's going to work for more people.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's perfect, especially since I'm very much like I get my blinders on. I'm like, this will work great. And then someone will bring up like, Abby, no, that's not how this group of people likes to interact with us. And
yeah,
I guess. So here are some other tips for you. That is honestly my favorite tip. And it honestly is one of the tips that I included here. So crowdsourcing these ideas is definitely the way to go. One, it relieves the heavy burden on you of trying to come up with something. And then you tap into all of these wonderful, diverse points of view. I was talking to Margot earlier about an event that an organization I work with is putting on in a couple of weeks. And that event idea came from one of our like facilities and maintenance board committee members. You never know who's going to have the next amazing idea. So if you get stuck, try crowdsourcing your ideas from staff or board members, or even talk to volunteers or long-term supporters that understand your mission and what works for you. You never know what ideas are out there. And then if you get stuck, I'm a huge advocate for mimicking other people. Either look at what organizations in your area are doing or look at what organizations in your space are doing. If you're an animal shelter in Georgia and you don't necessarily know a lot of other animal shelters in your area, you can look at what animal shelters around the country are doing and then adapt what works for them for your own audience. And then if you get stuck, try asking people what they think will work. If you have a loyal donor or a really heavily involved volunteer who will be honest with you and not just say like, yes, that sounds like a great idea. Try asking them what they think about your event idea. They may be able to anticipate questions or obstacles that you'll need to work around as you're planning. So tap into those supporters and tap into their experiences and see what you can come up with. And then especially if you're planning an event that is kind of unusual or hasn't really been done in your area before, you're probably going to get a ton of questions. So have a plan for answering those questions and supporting your participants as they support you. That can be something as simple as having a point person that your participants can contact. It could be something like Margot and her team do, where they put together fundraising toolkits for some of their participants. Whatever you can do to support your participants before the event is really underway is going to make you more successful, and it's going to make them have a better time. And then as they're fundraising for you, remember to reiterate to your supporters how much of an impact their engagement is going to make. Even if you have a brand new event that you've never run before and it's the coolest, most fun thing you've ever done in your whole life, people still want to know that their engagement is going to make a difference. So the formats change, but their motivations for supporting you are very much the same. And then I wanted to throw this in here because it's something that has caught me by surprise when I've participated in some other events. But if you have an event plan that requires access to specific materials, whether it's something easily printed like a race bib or something a little more solid like cupcakes to enjoy after your bike ride, have a plan for distributing those materials before it actually has to happen. And then make sure that that plan is communicated to your participants ahead of time. That way you're not slammed with 200 emails from people asking how to pick up their race materials the day before the event. We've seen it happen before. It's always a real bummer. And our third and final prediction is that peer-to-peer events are going to become increasingly part of larger compound events or campaigns instead of being standalone campaigns. So what that means is instead of having a 5K that is kind of a standalone event or standalone campaign with its own dedicated staff and its own dedicated marketing plan, we're increasingly seeing peer-to-peer events start to run alongside other campaigns that all point toward the same project and all have the same branding. And the reason we think this is happening is because, well, it's a few reasons. One, making your peer-to-peer event part of a larger overarching campaign gives people more opportunities to engage with you. So if you're running a charity 5K, I hate to run and I will not participate with you. But if that 5K is part of something bigger and I know that I can support your mission without having to go outside, I'll probably be more likely to do that. This is also a really useful strategy if you have a campaign that's going to be running for a long period of time. So many of you who are seasoned peer-to-peer fundraisers know how hard it can be to keep your supporters engaged for a very long time, especially if you have a long ongoing fundraising period associated with your campaign. It's hard to get people motivated to raise money sometimes for a month. And if you're running a quarter-long campaign, getting people excited about fundraising for 3 months is going to be a huge challenge. So what you can do is you can have a smaller peer-to-peer event that runs for a shorter period of time that kind of falls under that overarching campaign structure. And then this is going to be really helpful if you have a huge important campaign that you need to support, whether it's maybe it's a capital campaign, it could be your annual campaign. Giving people lots of different ways to engage with you, one, will help them identify something that's fun for them, and two, it'll kind of keep that idea of, or that feeling of novelty fresh for your organization's supporters. So, and I pulled a couple examples here. We had this group that did a peer-to-peer fundraiser and then complemented it with a huge merch push. That was really beautiful for them. A lot of people maybe didn't want to participate in their overall event, but they would be willing to buy a t-shirt or something. I shouldn't play favorites, but this example in the middle is one of my favorite events just because I'm obsessed with that bear. This group did an online auction with a peer-to-peer component. So they streamed their auction and they encouraged people, kind of like Margot and her team did, to host smaller virtual parties. So not necessarily a small table, but their biggest supporters were having online fundraisers and dinners in their homes and inviting people in their COVID bubbles over. So you had the peer-to-peer component, they were raising money from their friends and they were all participating in the event. And then I pulled this really cute example from the Boys and Girls Club of Indianapolis, who combined a huge text fundraising push with their peer-to-peer push. So maybe people didn't want to actually sign up to raise money, but they would be willing to share the call to action to donate by text with their friends and family. So all of these organizations really tapped into their donors' preferences and what their donors liked to do to support them, and came up with really creative combinations of different fundraising strategies. And we've seen this become increasingly popular. And I know that this was something that Margot and her team did as part of the Operation Good Samaritan campaign. There were tons of different fundraising styles that were included. I spent a weird amount of time looking at all of their forms last year and just exploring what they were doing. So here is kind of the rundown. So initially there was that peer-to-peer campaign that was set up to take place at that in-person luncheon. Margot told us how table captains got their friends and family involved. And then eventually that campaign kind of grew in scope to include the pieces she talked about. And this number, the $610,000 was from earlier. Has that number changed, Margot?
So that was last year's, specifically for this campaign. So, but since then, we're still continuously seeing, so we are about 27 to 30% over our original budgeted goal for total revenue, which is like, okay.
So you've told us a little about Operation Good Samaritan and kind of how it worked. And I know that you had the Good Samaritan Luncheon. How did this kind of come together for your organization, especially given the challenges that y'all faced last year?
Yeah, so Operation Good Samaritan, I still have a little bit of PTSD, not to make light of obviously PTSD, but I still have a lot of anxiety about this whole time period, because we had to launch this in 4 days. And so it was a massive undertaking to not only put together a strategy, but the creative. What are we going to do? We have to create new web forms. We have to create new web pages. And our team at the time had gone from a team of 6 down to a team of 2, because 4 of our team members decided to go home to kind of quarantine, self-quarantine, isolate themselves. And so it was myself and a coordinator who this was her first job. And so I say that to say that these things are obviously you have to incorporate fundraising 101 into some of this new age technology, right? In order to find the right channels, find the right positioning or the right form layout or the ask amount, so on and so forth. And so kind of bridging those two I also had to obviously train her on QGive and the new platforms, and now she's telling me things about it. So that's really awesome. But I feel like we literally called it Operation Good Samaritan because it was her and I in my office with a whiteboard with like a social media calendar, a launch schedule for our web forms, the peer-to-peer side. How are we going to do that? Who are we going to communicate with? And so it looked like a war room. And so that's literally how the name of Operation Good Samaritan came about, because and so when you talk about, how do those creative ideas come up, that just came out as a joke from someone else. And so we just kind of, we took it because it created an urgency that we really needed the supporters to hear.
Absolutely. So I know, so you had a smaller team, you had 4 days, and you still managed to put together this multi-pronged approach where you had lots of different fundraising methods, multiple different forms. Why did you all decide to go with that multi-pronged approach instead of sticking with a simple peer-to-peer event?
Because it wasn't going to raise the critical money that was needed. Our particular organization, so the Sharing Center, we focus on preventing hunger and homelessness. And we do consider ourselves as being a first responder agency. So we are a drop zone for like the American Red Cross to come if there's ever a hurricane here, or obviously a pandemic, or something where there's that need connected with FEMA. And so we went into emergency response mode, which means that we have to talk to a lot of people at the same time in order for us to not close. And so we were we had no idea how much money we were going to raise. We just knew we had to do what we had to do in order to raise as much as we could, because people were coming to us for financial assistance. People were coming to us for food that had never been here before. And so we knew that it was going to, after I think like week 3, we're like, this is not going to get better anytime soon. And so we really had to continue to fill our budget lines, in our bucket, so that we could perform. And so we just started trying to utilize as many different avenues and channels and, creative ways. Some of this was also donor prompted. Some donors asked us, like, how do I can't make it there to drop off food to your pantry. How do we do this? So a lot of times our donors were the ones that kind of prompted some of the other prongs of this.
Yeah. So I know that you kind of mentioned you had different people wanting to support you in different ways. You needed to throw out all of these different methods for people to support you. Did you notice any patterns in the way your donors kind of opted to support you, or trends there?
I would have to say that we have not sent out a mailing since February of this year. In our even our regular donors, like our who skew more towards mail, they are even starting to be prompted more to give via like our email solicitations, or even from Facebook, or other channels where we are soliciting them. So yeah, I would say that's kind of something that I'm trying to pay attention to, is the mail shift, and how many of those donors will continue to always give via mail. But then how many can we, kind of move into more of the digital channels, or prefer to be moved in that way?
That's really interesting. I know that was
Mhm.
something that we wondered about last year because there weren't staff people in the office to take checks to the bank. Very
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah.
So I feel like you have learned a lot. You've got this huge campaign under your belt. I know you're working on a zillion other campaigns. What advice would you give us if we're looking to run a compound event like you have, or what would you do differently next time, and how can we learn from that?
I would say have more than 4 days to do it. Um,
And hopefully more than 2 staff.
yes, and yes, hopefully, but I would definitely just keep listening to your donors, either, through indirect behavior or, direct statements. I really like this. I don't like this. Maybe you should do it this way. And really, our donors are always talking to us regardless of whether or not we're aware of it. So, are you seeing more of like people, following your Facebook page, like your regular donors and things like that, and didn't even realize that they weren't Facebook followers? Just pay attention to the crossovers, I think, that are happening. It's kind of really cool right now to watch, folks who never said the word Zoom a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and just say, "Oh, Zoom me." So I think that shift is really, really key to pay attention to.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I'm going to fly over these next couple of tips because we are coming up on time, but I wanted to reiterate what Margot said about understanding what your donors want, keeping an eye on those patterns, and then understanding your different donor segments and how you can support them. And then make sure that there's something for everyone. Like Margot said, some people may engage with you through mail. Some people may be open to kind of switching it up. And then do come up, regardless of what you do come up with a game plan for how you're going to track success and how you're going to track those donors' behavior. It's one thing to make a decision to hold back on sending out a direct mail campaign if you have hard data showing that your donors are changing their preferences. It's another to do it based on just an anecdotal evidence. If you decide to run a multi-prong campaign, try to keep your branding consistent across all those different elements. Your donors should know immediately when they land on a form what campaign they're donating to and what their money will achieve. And then, especially if you are running your campaign over a long period of time, try to reiterate and post regular updates expressing how donors are making a difference. It's always kind of a bummer to be asked repeatedly for money without knowing what it's already accomplishing. So get in front of that and keep your donors up to date on the progress that they're making. Just a couple quick top takeaways because we just covered a lot of information. Peer-to-peer fundraising remains extremely versatile and people are getting very creative with how they use it. Our 3 big predictions for peer-to-peer in the coming years is that we're going to continue to see virtual and hybrid events. So hopefully Margot's kind of tips and stories will help you put together a really great event. We're going to see fundraisers continue to push the envelope with really fun, creative events, and we're going to see those events be folded into larger compound campaigns. Now, Mark did let me know that we are right at time, so unfortunately we don't have time to dive really deep into Q&A, but if you would like to, you can email me. My email is abby.jarvis@qgive.com. If you have any questions about any of the topics we covered today, let me know. And then do remember that the recording and the slides are going to be made available to you so you can review them then. So thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Margot, thank you so much for sharing all of your experience and your expertise with us. Y'all keep an eye out for the trivia sessions that are going to be happening throughout this conference. I came up with some of the questions, so I hope you learned something. And if you really hate one of my questions, you can email me about that too. I'll send you a new one. All right, everyone, thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.